Falling in love was easy. It's the falling in love again that's proven to be a different story. Because now I know heartbreak. I now know what it feels like for the heart to gain, but I also know what it feels like for the heart to lose. And for some reason, my brain remembers the low more than it does the high. It's a step-by-step process, one day at a time. But within that time, if we so choose, I believe we can learn to love even greater than we did before the pain. After all, a muscle gets stronger after it tears. Hello, my hippies, and welcome to another episode of the Western Hippie Podcast. I'm your host, Michaela, and today I wanted to talk about that, it's kind of a weird topic, I guess, like that I'm 27 and single, and it's interesting because I don't know. I think it's interesting because it seems like it bothers other people more than it bothers me. Like they're more uncomfortable with the fact that I'm still single more than I'm uncomfortable with it. And I don't know if I would use the word that I'm uncomfortable with it, but I'm going to get into this. But definitely that was one of the reasons that I decided to step into my healing journey more seriously and deeper than I ever had before, because I was like, okay, there's actually something going on here that I need to address that's preventing me from stepping into this next stage of my life, because that's what I do believe this next stage of my life is. That's what that entails as far as getting into a relationship and navigating that part of life. And I was thinking about it before I started recording. It was like, I feel like I've got my cake made. Like I'm still making some adjustments. Like maybe I need to adjust the batter and make a different cake, but like I know my recipe to make a good cake. And I feel like relationships are like the frosting and the decoration of life. Like you can eat the cake, you can love the cake, it'd be a great cake, but there's something about the frosting and the decoration that just adds that zest. And it's funny. I was talking about infomercials yesterday, but they're like ShamWow to life. Like it just adds that pizzazz, I guess would be the word that I'm looking for to life. And I started thinking more about it last year, I suppose, because I really enjoyed being single. And like, I didn't even think about wanting to get into a relationship. Like there was one person and I was like, okay, if that person wanted to get into a relationship, I would. But other than that, like, I'm good. I'm good doing my own thing. And then when 2020 hit, it was kind of, I started feeling what I was missing out on might be a thing. Like I started realizing that there were things that I cannot get for myself. Like I can meet all my needs by myself, but there are certain things like the frosting and the sprinkles and the decor or whatever that you do get from other people. Like I believe we are human beings, that we are made for connection, that we are wired for love and connection. And without people, I mean, I don't know, this life would just be, I don't want to say pointless, but it would not, kind of. I do kind of want to say pointless, but I hope you know what I mean. Like this life just would not be what it is without people. It would be boring or dull. And it's like these people that add the color and the beauty. And, there's a time for black and white. There's a time for a cake without frosting. And then there's also this other stuff to life that we get to add. So I wanted to talk about this today because I had a friend fly in and hang out over the weekend, and we were talking about things. And I think there's a few misconceptions that I found about whether it's being single or being in a relationship. And then there's also this guilt around not being a man or a woman if XYZ has not happened in your life by a certain time. And I just want to call bullshit, to be honest with you. I want to call bullshit on all of it. I want to talk about it. And I believe the more we talk about the things that we are shameful of, it diminishes the power that it has over us. So the more that we can talk about the things that we're a little ashamed about or a little guilty about, if we speak them out loud, it like shame grows in the dark, but it burns in the light and it can go away. And so let's bring some of these things to life. Let's talk about it. Let's have more of these conversations. And I also want to have this conversation in a way that's not being single is better or being in a relationship is better. Like, I don't think either thing is better or worse. I think it just is. And we could argue that being in a relationship is better than being single. I would be in that camp. But I also think if you are single, that there's a point in honoring where you're at and knowing that this is occurring for a reason. And if you so choose to dive into those reasons. And so, yeah, that's what my goal is to do here today. So I guess without further ado, let's get into the, do we call this the juice of the conversation, the meat of the conversation? I don't know, but whatever it is, let's go. Saddle up. Let's go. Gosh, I wish I had that John Wayne quote, but we're saddling up and we're going. So why am I still single? I guess let's talk about that first. So there's two main reasons that I was thinking about as to why I'm still single. There's one that's fear. I don't believe I've ever talked about this publicly. I didn't really plan on talking about it publicly because I felt like it wasn't my story to share, but it is my story to share. I'm just going to share it from my perspective. And I had dated someone years and years ago. And we'd been talking for like maybe a month. And when I had went out on the first date with him, it was so confusing because if you know my story, I was molested when I was about ages 3 to 5. And then again, when I was 12 by somebody else. And so I didn't really, I was in such a self-protection mode. I really did not, I had crushes on guys in high school. I had crushes on guys in middle school, but even from middle school to high school, I was going through the trials and the court cases, and it's you don't really have time to think about that. It's oh, he's cute, but all my energy is kind of spent on this right now. And the thought of even adding something like that to my plate just seems awful. And then obviously there's body shame and dealing with the emotions of, for me, it was can't, trust any men. And I hadn't worked through any of that yet because the wound was wide open and fresh. So didn't even think about getting into a relationship in middle school. Liked somebody in high school, but I don't know. I honestly, I'm if he would have came up to me and asked me if I wanted to, I don't even know if I would have been into it because I was riding horses. And so it was just no, this is my time to just do what I want to do and kind of process all this other stuff that's happened. And then, so met this guy. I think I'd been out of high school for a few years. So I was 19, 20. Gosh, was I? Yeah, I guess I would have been 19 when I met him. Yeah. And had went on a date, and it was the weirdest experience for me and probably even weirder for him, but I really liked him. We met up, I rode with him, and we were just started talking, and it was the easiest thing. It was as easy for me anyway. It was as easy as breathing. And we were halfway through, and I was I had seen pictures of him. So his sister had set us up, and I'd seen pictures of him. I'm yeah, he's cute, but I don't know that, it doesn't seem like my type, but I also didn't have a type. And to this day, I didn't know this then, but I'm realizing this now. I don't tend to fall for people based on appearances. I cannot think of a time I've ever fell for somebody because of their appearance. I've always had a conversation with them. And when I was learning about the Enneagram, this actually helped me a lot, was Tracy O'Malley, who by far the best Enneagram expert I've ever met or talked to. I had her do a typing session with me because I was typed wrong and mind-boggling. And it was her podcast that made me realize I was typed wrong for the Enneagram, because she was she was talking about the Enneagram 5, and I'm actually Enneagram 6, but the Enneagram 5, 6, and 7 are all in the head triad. And so when she was talking about the head triad, and specifically with Enneagram 5, she's you're more sometimes you're more into the mind fuck than the physical fuck. And I was oh my gosh, that's me. I love talking to, I love it. And so for me, and I didn't realize this then, when I was 19, because I didn't learn this till I was probably like 24 or 5. But I could just talk to this guy, and it was so easy. And we weren't even halfway through the night. And I was like, I really like this guy. And every muscle in my body was telling me to run for my life. And I also didn't think that he liked me. I was like, I don't know why anybody, oh, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud. I'm like, I don't know why anybody would like me. Like, I'm just not that cute. I'm not that funny. I'm just not. Like, I'm just me. Like, I'm going to go die with my horses alone. And so I was like, he won't ask me out again. So, like, I don't have to worry about it. Like, we went out. We had fun. It was good talking to him. Maybe we'll be friends because, like, I know his family. But it's nice knowing you. Well, we get to the end of the night, and he asked me out again. Or he asked me to go out with him again. And I was like, wait, what? Like, my plan was to run. And it was going to work out because you weren't going to ask me to stay or like come back again. And now what do I do? Now what do I do? And so I was like, I know I don't have time. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I'm working. I'm going to school. Or I was going to school. I took a couple of college classes at a community college. I was riding horses and excuses go on and on and on. And I was like, I really enjoyed you. I really enjoyed you. Nice to see you. Thanks for dinner. Gotta go. Bye. It's like, oh, Michaela. And like went over to my friend's house and just was like, I don't like him. And in my head, it was like, yes, you do. But I couldn't figure out. I honestly, I guess I should have guessed it was a trauma response, but also like that would have been obvious. So let's not talk about the obvious. And went over to my friend's house and was like trying to convince myself that I didn't like him. But from that day, that was like in October, to I saw him again that next April. We ran into each other somewhere. I did not stop thinking about him. And like he worked down the road from where I lived. And like I see his truck and I'm like, God, Michaela, just text him. Like just text him and say like, I'm sorry. I was a dumbass. Can we go out again? And I couldn't get myself to do it. And when we ran into each other that next March or April or whatever it was, I was like, I don't know why my body is still telling me to run, because it absolutely is. But like, I can't fight what my heart is feeling. And there's something about this dude that I really like. And so we started hanging out more, and like halfway, I guess a couple weeks or like halfway into it or whatever it was, I don't even know. I was still on guard. Like I was hanging out with him, but like against my body's rules, I guess. Like everything in my body was still telling me to run, but I was like fighting it. And I had a dream about my cousin who really helped me a lot when I was going through my court and the trial cases. It was so wild because in this dream, he came up to me and was like, Michaela, you're safe with this guy. He's a good guy. You're gonna be okay. And it was like this wild thing of like, I knew that, but like I wasn't admitting that to myself. And so I finally had let my guard down and was opening up. And like, if I felt like, I just remember, we would talk and then like, I'd give it, God, like sometimes I'm like, I don't think we give the good guys enough credit for hanging with us. Cause I'm like, man, I gotta admire this guy. Cause I was and maybe I seemed like I felt like more of a hot mess on the inside than I appeared on the outside. I have no idea, but I, finally started like opening up more. I would barely give it, like before this dream happened, I would barely give him a hug and I would run. Not really, but I was like, walk away as fast as you can. Goodbye. And then after that, if I felt myself, like it was kind of crazy how naturally we respond to, and like my love language is definitely like physical touch is number one for me, but it was kind of crazy like how once I opened up, how naturally I could be more affectionate. And so I started letting myself do that. Like if I felt like that I wanted to hug him or what, it was like just coming more naturally, and I was opening up more. And so then one night we were hanging out And I think we had both fallen asleep on the couch or something, but I knew this is like where my mother comes out sometimes and I'm still working on it. But I was like, I woke up, it was late, he was asleep, and I was like, crap, he has to work really early in the morning. I need to make sure he gets home. And so like I went into mom mode a little bit. And when I walked him out to his truck, we kissed, and I remember I was on the ground, and then he picked me up, and when I was on the ground, I was fine. But at some point, and I thought it was when he kissed me, but after doing some of the MDMA therapy and other stuff, when he picked me up, I think he touched my leg, and the leg like triggered something that had happened with the guy that molested me when I was 12, and I blacked out and I dissociated from my body. And I remember, like, if you've never, I should do a podcast on it, because I try to do podcasts on things that people need to hear, like a Me Too, because there's some things in life that it's like, man, you just feel like you are crazy or wild. And so then talking to somebody else that has experienced it is freeing and healing in a way of just hearing the Me Too. Because if you've never dissociated, it's wild. It is the craziest and wildest thing, because you're like, your soul leaves your body and you're looking at yourself and what's going on from up above. And so I'm looking down at us and I'm like, okay, like, I didn't think this would ever happen again, but it happened. And then now we're up here and now we're safe. And then all of a sudden I was like, Michaela. And I said his name in my head. I was like, it's him. We're okay. We don't need to do this anymore. And I go back into my body. But by the time I'm back in my body, so the horse trainer, when he would kiss me, I would bite my lips. So I would suck both my lips like into my mouth and I would bite them. And I had done that. And I was like, he was setting me back down on the ground. And I was like, what the hell just happened? Because at this point, that had been 6 years, I think, since everything had happened with the horse trainer. And of course, I had been telling myself I was quote unquote fine. So when I had told myself like I was fine, that I was healed, what happened with the horse trainer didn't bother me anymore. It was like everything I had been telling myself had proven to be a lie in a second. And now somebody else was involved. And I was like, I don't know what to do. No idea what to do. I'm like, I looked at him. I remember I gave him a hug. I'm like, I'm so sorry. And ran back into the house. And I was like, I didn't know what to do. And so that is the fear that has kept me single, because I thought I was fine. And in that moment when I realized that I wasn't fine, it freaked me out. And like, for me, I was like, I feel lucky that I was with him because I knew I was safe with him. And I didn't want that to happen with like some random person or someone I didn't feel safe with. And like, would I have put myself back into that situation? Like, probably not. But there's always that what if, what if you're out somewhere and you black out with somebody else? And I didn't know what to do. And so a few weeks after, like, some things happened, like we quit talking. But for me, like, that situation never got resolved. And like, I never got a chance to try again. And it was this like, how do I explain it? Like, the reason that we split and like the reason I believed we split were two different things. So I knew we split because of like intellectually, I knew we split because of what, him and I had talked about. But in my head, we split because I couldn't even kiss him properly. Like, I wasn't even good enough or worthy enough or whatever enough. Like, I was just these damaged goods that couldn't even kiss a guy that she liked. And so I I didn't know what to do with that. Like, just the thought of not knowing when your body is going to do this thing. And like, I didn't know was probably, to one of this day is probably one of the scariest things I have faced for myself and dealt with, because I don't like not being in control. And so not being in control of this thing was ultimately 90% of what led me to psychedelics, because I didn't know what else to do. So if you have listened to my psychedelic podcast or my MDMA podcast, I had talked about that there was a lot of things that had led up, because psychedelics had been in my radar. But I kind of told myself, I'm like, well, I'll get back into another relationship and then I can work through this. And then it just wasn't happening because I was scared enough that I was blocking like any man to come into my life. Like, no way in hell did any man have a chance. And so the 2020 thing happened and I was like, okay, I have to address this because I am feeling like lonely. I am getting to a point where I would like to be in a relationship, but I knew very well that I was blocking any form of relationship to get into my life. So the fear was a really big piece of it. The other piece of it, so number 2, is I knew I wanted to do things differently. And this wasn't conscious for a long time. And if you're into more woo-woo stuff, like I believe my soul decided this before I was even born. Like I wanted to do things differently. I wanted to have relationships different than what my family had had. Like I want to fall in love more and more every year. I don't want to be in a relationship where I'm like, well, I love you, but I don't really like you. Like I have always said, my acupuncturist had this really beautiful metaphor of a relationship is 2 trees standing together to shade ground. When you're a tree combined, when you're twisted around each other, you can't shade as much ground than if you were 2 individual trees standing next to each other, but shading the same ground. Like this is our ground, we've got it, but we're also individual people. And so I kind of transformed that metaphor into, I want to be 100% me. I want him to be 100% him. And then I want us to come together and create this 200% and do this family, or create a family and create a life together. That's just even better. And that's the frosting and the sprinkles or whatever, the richness to life. But I always knew I wanted to have the me figured out. And I know I will figure out more of myself once I get into a relationship, but I will figure out the most of the me thing and who I am before I get into a relationship, because I don't want to not know and lose myself in somebody else or lose myself into a relationship, because I've already done that with the sexual assault and the child abuse experiences, like in a weird, really messed up way. And I'll do a podcast on this as well. And if you ever have anything, like if I blurb something out and you're like, man, I would really like her to go deeper on that, feel free to send me a DM on Instagram. And I don't know that there's anything that I won't discuss further in depth. So if you ever hear me say something and you want me to go further in depth, send me a message on Instagram. My Instagram's always linked in the show notes, but it's at Michaela Pollock. And so I always knew that I wanted that. I started reading Alison Armstrong's books in 2015, 16. If you haven't read those, total game changer. I wanted to be in partnership, 2 individuals doing life together, creating something even more beautiful. And I knew even as a child, like I could look around. It's like crazy because I don't know why. Maybe more kids than we realize have this figured out and we don't give them credit for it. I don't know. But I knew something wasn't right and I knew something wasn't working. And so I'm like, I'm going to figure this out no matter what. Is it going to be without trials and tribulations and struggle? Like, absolutely not. But it's like how we go through those together. I want to be different, and how we do life. Someone said on Instagram, it's, Yeah, it was Alexa at that sex chick. She was like, I married my husband not because of how he loves me, but because of how we fight. Because her parents had been divorced. She talks about it on her podcast like an insane amount of times. And I feel that deeply what she means of that's something that I think about. Like, I am almost more concerned about how we'll fight than how we'll love, because the fight is what makes or breaks the deal for the most part. Like, obviously we all have different ways that we love and need to feel loved, but that was the other main reason. It's like, man, I want to do this differently. The way these things are going with some other relationships in my family, it's very obvious to me that it's not working. And I am bound and determined to make this thing work in some way, shape, or form. And then there's one other thing that I feel like is a little different than doing it differently, and I feel like deserves its own little shout out, I suppose, is being fully secure in myself. And two of the things that have really helped me in the last year is human design and astrology. And never in a million years did I think I would be reading and studying astrology. Like, that's for the hippies. Apparently I am a hippie now, but I'm like, that's for the crazies. It's a bunch of BS. Like, you go look at your pretty little stars. Like, I'll be down here on Earth. Yeah, well, I was wrong, because I believe, if you're curious about something, look into it. Even if you only learn one thing, because if I only learned this one thing from astrology, it was a game changer for me. And I was reading something about the karma or my lesson or something like that in this lifetime with when I was born. And it was learning how to be secure in myself, because it was like, I was always looking for like validation and completion within other people. And when I first read this not even a month ago, and I was like, dude, I've been single basically my whole life other than this like brief period of time. So nice try. But then I sat with it and I was like, no, I've been single and I've still been chasing this pattern. Like, even though I didn't think I was like, no, I'll be complete when, I'll be secure when, I can enjoy life and do this right now. But some of these feelings that I'm not feeling right now, I'm waiting for somebody else to make me feel instead of just feeling them by myself, whether that was love or security or joy or a sense of self. Like, I was always looking for that in other people, specifically romantic relationships, even when I was single. So just having that piece of information, like I said, if that was the only thing I ever learned from astrology, it was a game changer for me of just being aware and being able to shift that. And I want that. I don't believe it's fair to put certain things on our partner. I believe it's our job to be happy. And then when we come together in partnership, we might make each other more happy, but like, I was already happy. There are days, Brene Brown has this, like I said, I've been like studying relationships and partnerships because I did want to do it differently. And one of the things that she says she does that she really likes, and it sounds good to me, is her and her husband will communicate of like, I've only got 20% today. Can you bring the 80? And it's like, yep, honey, I got you. And they go back and forth, letting each other know where they're at. And basically the percentage is just giving them a heads up. Like, I'm not doing very well today. I need extra support. And if both of them aren't doing very well, okay, now it's time to call in grandma and grandma for backup or whatever that looks like. And I always really liked that. And so I do believe that's important in a partnership, is helping your partner out when things are going wrong. But one of my goals for myself is I never want for my partner, like, you're in charge of my confidence, you're in charge of my happiness. And if I'm not happy, or if I'm not confident, or if I'm feeling sad, like, that's on you. It's because at the end of the day, that's on me. And so that security in myself was learning how to have that foundation poured and ready to go. And then when whoever my partner is comes in, it's like, okay, now we build together. And so those three things, the fear, the wanting to do it differently, and then also wanting to be secure in myself. Like those are the three things as to why I'm still single. And I'm or why I believe I'm still single. I'm sure God has another reason, but that went longer than I thought it was going to. Apparently I needed to tell that story longer than I thought I needed to. So I think I went over how I feel about it. Sometimes I think people around me are more concerned about it than I am, but this may sound really weird, but I've always known deep down inside, once I get these few things to click, this security in myself, I just know he's going to come in. Like I don't know. Maybe it's wild. Maybe it's crazy, but I'm like, no, I know when it's right, it's going to happen. And I don't have to worry about it. Like it's all in God's hands. So I guess how I feel about it is I'm actually kind of excited. I feel like I've done a lot of stuff I feel like it's coming fairly soon. So I don't know. I'm just excited. It's so wild. I can't really explain, but I just have this deep inner knowing of like, no, when it's time, it's happening and God's got my back and I have to focus on these few things and we're going to be good. So I guess maybe it's worth saying, I have felt all the things. I have felt the guilt. I have felt the shame of you're not a woman until you've had a baby or are married and all the, like, I have felt every single one of these things. And those were all opportunities to ask why. Why do I feel this way? Is it because I feel this way? Is it because culture has told me to feel this way? And do I actually feel guilty about it? Because some of the things that I've had to work through by myself, I do see where it would have been really cool to have a partner to support me or help me work through it. But as I've talked about in my other episodes, my friendships have been great and they've really supported me through that. And I can't wait to find a partner who can also support me through these next phases. And I'm really, really thankful I did not have kids going through all of that, because I'm not going to be perfect. I'm not going to be a perfect parent. It doesn't exist, but I want to be able to have control over my emotions and also know how to work through my emotions to help my kids work through their emotions, because that's all we are until we're 7 years old, is these like wild little emotional creatures. And I think that's why I'm not beating myself up over it anymore, is because now that I'm on this section of my journey, it just all makes sense as to why. But if you are at a point where you feel guilty or ashamed, I want you to honor that. It seems counterintuitive, but the more we fight it, like that, what we resist persists, the more we fight it, the longer it stays. And if we just give into it and get curious, why do I feel this way? Are these my things? Is it culture's things? Is it my parents? Is it my family? Like, what is it that makes me feel guilty about being single or shameful about being single? Because, and I don't know if this is wrong or right, but it is how I feel. But I've always said I would rather be single and secure with myself than be in a relationship that's a living hell. And it's just this weird thing of, we almost have like, if you're single, it's better than being in a relationship. And if you're in a relationship, it's better than being single. And like I said earlier, I don't think neither one are good or bad. I just think they are. And wherever you're at, I hope you honor that. And this too shall pass wherever you're at. Things get better and they get worse. But if we stay in our current ways and our current circumstances, things may shift, but they're going to have like a similar tune. So if we really want to change, I guess I'm getting metaphorical today, but if we really want to change like the beat or the tune, like we have to change the way that we're playing and being and singing and, making all these things. So don't, my recommendation is like, don't be ashamed if you are still single, and don't feel guilty. And also be willing to look in the mirror and say, what about me is keeping myself single? And if you're single but dating and keep attracting a similar person, don't be afraid to look in the mirror and say, you know, what about me is attracting this kind of person? Because at the end of the day, we can't control them. We can't control anybody else, but what we can control is ourselves. And we can look in the mirror and say, for me, like, I'm terrified. I'm scared. I don't know when I'm going to disassociate. I don't know when I'm going to leave my body. And this fear is preventing me from getting into a relationship. Or I don't believe I'm worthy of having the man I desire or the woman I desire. So I'm attracting a watered down version of that person, or someone who also doesn't believe they can be all they can be, because I don't believe that I can attract somebody who is all that they can be or wants to be all they can be, or something like that. You know, we have these little things that are just running the show in the background of our subconscious mind that's attracting these people into our lives. And so really, to attract somebody new, we have to believe somebody. If to attract someone new, we have to believe new things. And so the only way we can do that is if we look in the mirror. And I think sometimes we believe like we're wrong, like, or we're a mistake, or we're a mess up. It's like, no, we just believe or think something that's no longer serving us, and we need to let it go. And learning how to not take that personally is one of the most empowering things in the world that you can ever learn for yourself. So use this as an opportunity to learn and to practice and to try new things. You know, maybe I'm really not into the dating thing. Like, it's just not who I am really. And maybe because of my experiences, I'm like, yep, nope, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. I'm good. And so when I say dating thing, like online dating or an opportunity where multiple people could come at me at once, like that is not my cup of tea at all. I would rather, like, is what I've talked to God about. I would rather meet somebody through somebody. Like, that is my ideal situation. And so, but if you are like, this can totally be in either situation. Honestly, it could totally be like, nope, I'm not attracting the right thing. What needs to shift? And I really I cannot recommend Allison Armstrong enough, but she had this one video. It's on her Instagram where my goal, as my witness, my goal is to get her on the podcast. And she talks about when you're first dating, on the first date, you talk about the things that are I don't remember what she called them, but it was basically like the things that you think that if this person finds out X about me, they're going to run away. And she talks about those things on the first date. So one of the things that she talked about is her husband had passed away and she had just started dating again. And she was like, so I told, I think she said his name was Dan. She told Dan that, I still love my husband very much. He passed away. In many ways, I still want to honor him. And I believe he sent you to me. And so if that's too, I don't know if she said this part, but if that's too weird, if that's too much, please go now. Let's get this away on the first date. And that takes a lot of pressure off of you too. So you can just be who you are. And I obviously didn't know. I'm a big Toby Keith nerd, but I wish I didn't know now what I didn't know then, but I just didn't know it then. But one of the things I'm going to bring this up, you may touch me one day, you may kiss me one day, and I may black out. I don't know. If it does happen, this is how I would like to handle it. This is what seems to work. If you say your name and remind me that you're not him, the person that created the blackout thing or whatever. I said that came out weird, but you know what I mean? Usually if they say their name, I come back. So it's hold me, say your name, and we'll be okay. We'll be okay. My plan as of right now, we'll see how it goes, is to get that out in either first date or the second date, because I don't want to have to worry about being in the moment, it happening and not knowing what to do again, because that was almost worse than it happening itself, the event itself. So really being single is just an opportunity, in my opinion, to just learn more about yourself. And I think it could be really beautiful if we know how to use it. And I think the same thing in relationships. I think they're really beautiful if we know how to, I don't want to say use it, but like how to navigate them. And there's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. Like it just is. And I say that a lot, but it's a good reminder for me of it just is. And at the end of the day, it's all, like I said, it's all data of, is this working? Is it not working? And if it is, great. If it's not, okay, let's shift it. And maybe if it is going great, maybe we do more of that. And that's one thing that I do my best when I see people with a relationship that I want something similar to. I do my best to ask questions. I learned a long time ago, like, if you want apples, you don't go to a peach tree. If you want peaches, you don't go to a pear tree. And so when I look at, I don't take advice from people who have relationships that I don't want. I may ask them questions. You know, if I see somebody in a relationship that I don't want, I may ask them questions like, you know, how do you guys communicate, or how's life going, or, you know, stuff like that. Cause I'm going to learn, like, I don't want that. So I'm going to make a mental note, like, we're not going to do that because that's not what I want. And vice versa. If I find somebody that has a relationship, I ask them questions like, how do you guys communicate? My friends' parents, how they deal with conflict. I love it. I hope to create that in my relationship of how they deal with conflict. And so I've asked them, if you don't mind me asking, how do you do this? How did you decide to do this? Because I want to be able to work through conflict calmly and in conversation. I've dealt with fighting. I've dealt with yelling in my family experiences. I'm done. I don't want to do it. Like, the yelling thing is just, no, not doing it again. So ask questions, you know, get curious. And I hate to say this, but this is what's coming to mind. Like, instead of treating it like you're lost, like, treat it like it's a scavenger hunt or a journey of, like, you're finding clues to get you to the X that marks the spot. And sometimes I think the key is just falling in love with where we're at, you know, falling in love with the life that we have and where we're currently at. And if I've learned anything in this last year, it's like denying and not accepting where we're at prevents us from getting to where we want to go. So, man, friend, if you're listening to this, like, learn to fall in love with where you're at and the lessons life has had to teach you, and just the adventure and journey of being alive. It sounds simple, and I know it's someone who's trying to figure this out. I know it's not as simple as I'm making it sound. And I also don't think it's as complicated as we make it. So I think we're going to call that a wrap for the day. If I missed anything, if I left anything out, please send me a DM on Instagram. If you don't have an Instagram, you can email me. It's michaelalpollock@gmail.com. I'll link that in the show notes. As I said earlier in the podcast, if I've mentioned anything and you would love me to go deeper on something, or if you have a question you would love me to go deeper on in another podcast episode, please send me a message. Please send me an email. I would love to connect and talk with you. Like I said, I believe the more that we have these conversations, the less that we'll feel shame about them, and we can actually solve the problem when we don't feel ashamed about it. So yeah, it's a wild ride out here. So anyway, thank you if you've made it this far. I truly appreciate you. If you got value out of this episode, if you enjoyed this episode, please take a screenshot, share it to your Instagram story, and tag me at Michaela Pollock. As always, I would love to connect with you. Send me a DM. Let me know if you want another episode. And yeah, thank you, my hippies, and I will talk to you next time.